is we need to be very careful. Of course, with mindfulness, we are aware of the object. In that sense, we can use the word awareness. Mindfulness, we are aware of the object. We're present with the object. So that is step 2. But let's say we didn't manage to observe our pleasant, unpleasant feelings, and already we've got to step 3. So we're seeing things as very inherently attractive or inherently unattractive based on those feelings. Can we do something at step 3 to avoid going to step 4?
I think I would check the framing, like the context in which this is experienced, like in what context is this really attractive, or in what if it was me, stuff like that.
You mean like check?
What if it was me that acted like this, but I still think that person is bad? Like, check the context in which I experienced it.
Yeah. I think I know what you're getting at. So, if something is inherently attractive, let's say when we look at these flowers and we have a pleasant experience, we naturally assume there must be some attractive quality there causing my pleasant feeling. But if these flowers were inherently attractive from their own side, it would mean that everyone who looked at those flowers would have to have a pleasant experience because they're attractive. But does everyone who look at these flowers have a pleasant experience? No. Because there's no attractiveness or beauty there, is there?
But most of people...
I'm not so sure. Most of people.
Yeah.
Maybe in certain cultures, most people would see these as very unattractive. So isn't it cultural conditioning a lot? Maybe?
Yeah, but there are attractive people and...
Is there?
Yeah.
What's attractive now?
In our culture. Yeah,
Exactly.
In every culture,
Yeah. I mean, the classic is fashion. The classic. I think it operates on a 7-year cycle. What's attractive now in fashion in 7 years' time is an abomination. You'd never wear it. And the fashion industry has to perpetuate this, otherwise they'd never sell any more clothes. So there's always this cycle of, oh no, that's not attractive anymore. So we create the beauty through cultural conditioning and so forth. So, I mean, here, don't we say beauty is in the eye of the beholder? So this is getting closer to the Buddhist view. But intellectually, we may appreciate beauty in the eye of the beholder. Maybe that's true. But experientially, is that how we're seeing the flower? No. If we were seeing the flower experientially in that way, we would simply enjoy the beauty, and it would actually become impossible to generate any attachment. Because there's no beauty there, we are creating the beauty. So if we can reflect in that way here, we can avoid getting caught up here. But let's say we didn't manage to do that, we're at step 4. So now we're getting caught up in attachment and aversion and confusion and the other mental afflictions. What can we do at step 4 to avoid going to step 5?
To think about if you were stuck in a room full of, I don't know, chocolate cakes. To think about something that you attracted or like in like bigger scale and all the time, like, you know, you said that if you have something, like if you're attached to something, you want to have it bigger.
Oh, you mean like if you have attachment coming up, to think about, well, if I have a lot of this, what would happen?
Yeah.
Yeah, that could work. That could work. Again, I think the key with step 4, like step 2, is mindfulness.
To get to the body, like to see that where the attachment is.
That as well. But even to do that, we need mindfulness. So again, the key with this is mindfulness. If we have developed our mindfulness, we'll start to notice when some attachment, some aversion is starting to come up, then we're still in control. And then we can do a number of things. One thing is simply observe that mental affliction arise and pass, arise and pass. So that's something very simple to do. On top of that, when a mental affliction arises, we can apply some particular direct antidotes to that mental affliction. And each mental affliction has sort of its own particular direct antidote. For example, often it's said the direct antidote to attachment is impermanence. So if we see some attachment arising with respect to something, to see that thing as constantly changing. And then if we can see it as constantly changing, then there's nothing for attachment to grab. Also, of course, here, with these mental afflictions coming up, we can also apply methods from the wisdom side of things and the compassion side of things. You know, for example, again, if we have attachment coming up, and this also applies to the third step, is investigate the object if we have attachment. Where is the beauty in that object that is causing my attachment? Or where is the ugliness in that object that's causing my aversion? So that's using a Vipassana approach, investigating the object. Or we can investigate the subject. If some anger is arising, or attachment, where is the me that is having this anger or attachment? And if we investigate to find this me, this will diffuse the ignorance, which of course is the basis of the attachment or aversion in the first place. So there are a number of approaches we can use at step 4 to avoid going to step 5. But again, to begin any of those, mindfulness is really the key. But let's say we didn't manage to do that, and we got to step 5. So now we have acted on our impulses, on our mental afflictions. And what I'd like to do here is just focus on any harmful non-virtuous actions. Because the Buddhist assertion is that harmful non-virtuous actions lead to suffering. Virtuous actions lead to pleasure, happiness. So if we have done or engaged in a harmful non-virtuous behaviour, then that action has left a potential on our mind that will ripen later as some sort of suffering experience. So what can we do to purify our mind of negative behaviour, negative habits?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, okay. If we engage in some sort of negative, harmful behaviour, the Buddhist assertion is each one of those has a result, consequence, which is some sort of suffering experience that will arise in the future. So, if we've engaged in the harmful behaviour, are we destined to experience that result in the future? No, because we can affect that potential that we've generated by doing that behaviour. We can weaken that so that it either ripens less or doesn't ripen at all. So what we're talking about is purifying our mind of these negative habits and negative tendencies. So what can we do to do that? And so within Buddhism then we have a presentation called the 4 opponent powers. So these are 4 things we can do to reduce negative imprints, negative habits. The first of those is to have sincere regret for having done that negative behaviour. So again, we need to distinguish between regret and guilt. So again, if we've done something harmful, we feel guilty, that's based on cognitive fusion. Bad me, bad me. So that is completely useless. All it does is makes us feel bad and it paralyses us. Rather, if we have the correct perspective and simply acknowledge, I have done this harmful behaviour, then we can regret the behaviour and look at ways of overcoming it. So even having sincere regret for that negative behaviour is already weakening that imprint and weakening that tendency to engage in that harmful behaviour. So that's the first step. The second is called reliance, or sometimes translated as foundation. Reliance here means that we're all trying to follow a good direction in our life. So we're relying on some sort of basis, some platform for the direction of our life. If we've done some harmful behaviour, we've sort of fallen down from our foundation. So this second point is about picking ourselves back up and reaffirming the positive direction that we want to follow our life in. In Buddhism, this takes on a very specific form, and I'll talk about that tomorrow. But in general, it just simply means to reaffirm the positive direction that we want to follow our life. So that also has a very positive impact and weakens that negative imprint, negative habit. The third point is called remedy. Remedy is simply think of some practical remedy for that negative behaviour. For example, let's say we verbally abuse someone at work today. The remedy could be, okay, tomorrow I'm going to apologise to them. So here, it's good to be very practical and try to do something the direct positive opposite of what you did, if possible. Sometimes that is, for whatever reason, is not possible to do the direct opposite. Then it's recommended that to do any positive behaviour with a motivation of wishing to overcome this negative habit is also very effective. Of course, the long-term remedy is to get rid of ignorance, because all negative behaviour is based on ignorance. So the long-term remedy is Vipassana practice. Wipe out ignorance. Short-term remedy is practical, positive opposite. And the fourth of the four opponent powers is resolve. And this is to make a strong determination not to engage in that negative behaviour again. Here we need to be practical. If the negative behaviour is something that we have a very strong habit of doing, and we do it maybe many times every day, no point in saying here, I'm never going to do that thing again. It's not going to work. Particularly, for example, let's say we're the sort of person that maybe tells many lies every day. No point in saying, I'm never going to lie again, because we've just told another lie. So here, if it's a strong habit, pick a time frame and say, okay, for the next day, I'm not going to do that thing. If that's way too difficult, for the next hour, I'm not going to do that thing. If that's way too difficult, for the next 10 minutes, I'm not going to do that thing. So pick an amount of time that, with effort, normally you can manage. And then over time, you can extend it from 10 to 15 minutes to half an hour a day, a week, a month, a year, the rest of your life. In that way, you can even break some very strong negative habits. So ideally, we would do this immediately after having realised we've done some harmful behaviour. To immediately regret, reaffirm the positive direction, do some sort of remedy, and make a strong determination not to do it again. So the ideal is, of course, the best is not to do the negative behaviour, but if you've done it, then do that immediately to really purify that and weaken that habit. In a practical way, what we can do as well is we can do this at the end of every day. It's a very good way to finish the day. And that is to review our day before we go to bed. How did our day go? And then maybe pick the top 3 negative things we did during the day. Don't make it too complicated. Don't pick 10 or 15 because it'll be too much effort. So maybe pick the top 3 and then go through each one of those with these 4. And then, together with that, I think what's also very helpful, and I think even more important in our modern society, is in our modern society we always tend to focus on the negative. Always focusing on negative. We have such a biased, lopsided view of ourselves and others. So to balance that, we need to focus on the positive. So therefore, doing this is good to weaken negative tendencies and behaviour. But also, we need to focus on the positive things we did during the day to have a balanced view of ourselves and to increase our positive habits. So we can do the opposite of this with the positive behaviour. So again, maybe pick the top 3 positive things we did during the day. And of course, instead of regret, rejoice. Rejoice in that behaviour. Again, don't praise ourselves. This is cognitive fusion. This is not going to help. Rejoice in the behaviour and then make a strong resolve or determination to continue to do that the following day. So that's going to strengthen the positive behaviour, and then we can really start to get a balanced view of ourselves instead of a completely biased negative view of ourselves. So that's something we can do at the end of the day to finish the day. Any questions about this?
Can you please tell another time about the remedy? We don't understand.
Remedy just means to do some positive opposite action. Like if we did like the example I gave was, if we verbally abuse someone, the positive opposite is to go and apologise for that. If we harmed, then help. Something directly positive opposite. If you can. Sometimes logistically it's not possible. If it's not possible to do something directly positive opposite, then any positive behaviour with a motivation of wishing to overcome that negative behaviour is helpful.
What is the remedy for a positive thing? So if you choose a few positive things...
Well, there's no remedy. Well, the remedy is keep doing it.
Okay.
Do it more.
That's not resolved?
Yeah, so that's resolved. So yeah, I mean, with a positive thing, it's really just rejoice and resolve, these 2 elements.
What about forgiving yourself for being, like, if you did something wrong and you feel, you do feel regret? And
That's right.
You feel, what about forgiving yourself? For what
Yeah,
you did?
yeah. I mean, I think that comes within regret, because with regret, we're regretting the behaviour and we can still feel good about ourselves. We can have forgiveness or compassion for ourselves. If we do cognitive fusion, then that becomes almost impossible.
Because it becomes blame and guilt.
Yeah, then it becomes blame and guilt, bad me, I don't deserve forgiveness or compassion because I'm just a bad person. Okay. Right, one more point and then it's time for another break. And let's say we didn't manage to do this and we got to step 6 and now we're experiencing something. And again here, I'd like to just focus on our unpleasant, painful experiences. Can we do something when we're caught up in the middle of an unpleasant, painful experience to reduce suffering? Yes or nothing to do?
Meditation? Meditation?
In the middle of a suffering?
No.
Difficult. Can we do something?
I guess it's not the correct answer, but we can go and do something that makes us that makes pleasure for
another attachment where it feels like
Yes, what others?
Can.
What helps me?
I mean, this, but the reason this can work is a little bit is because, again, when we have something unpleasant, we go straight to aversion. And if we have strong aversion to any unpleasant experience, a huge percentage of the suffering we experience is self-induced through the aversion. So what we can do to reduce suffering is stop aversion. And that is, if we're having some unpleasant experience, we can follow Shanti Deva's advice. If the situation can be remedied, why get upset? Just fix it. And if the situation cannot be remedied, what's the point in getting upset? This too shall pass. So if we can practice acceptance, and acceptance doesn't mean resignation. If you can fix it, you fix it. Acceptance simply means acknowledging I'm experiencing this unpleasant situation at the moment. Either I can accept that fact or I can try and push it away. Trying to push it away, having aversion, all that does is it magnifies the suffering many-fold. So therefore, the first thing we can do here is stop aversion. Just be with the unpleasant situation. If you can overcome it, then you overcome it. If you can't, this too shall pass. And in that way, at least we won't magnify the amount of discomfort or suffering we experience. On top of that, we can do one more thing, which was mentioned here, is what's called Tong Len. And that's what we're going to be doing actually this evening. I think this evening's practice. Not this afternoon session, this evening session. And that is that one of the reasons that we have aversion, of course, is in a difficult situation, we're focused on me, poor me, poor me. And then we have this aversion. So one thing that can be very helpful is on top of acceptance, we can use this difficult situation to develop compassion. For example, let's say we're having a migraine headache. If we have a migraine headache and we go, oh no, not that migraine headache again, all we do is we magnify the suffering we experience. If we can go, okay, I've got a migraine headache, can I do something about it? Okay, I can take medication that'll fix it. Or, no, medication doesn't work. Okay, it'll pass. And at least then we won't magnify the suffering by aversion. So that's one thing we can do. On top of that, we can use that difficult situation to develop compassion. We can say, okay, I'm not the only person on the planet who's got a migraine headache now. There must be thousands of other people who have migraine headaches right now, and maybe even much worse than me. So by me willingly accepting my migraine headache, may all others be free of their migraine headache. So this is a little bit what's called Tong Len approach, which we're going to look at this evening and tomorrow. And so thereby we're using this opportunity to develop compassion. And because we're focused on others, often what happens is even the discomfort we feel dissipates. You know, how often do we see, for example, maybe someone's caught in a car accident and maybe they've smashed their leg and excruciating pain, but their partner's in the accident and they're so concerned about them they don't even notice the pain in the leg because they're not self-obsessed. Poor me, they're focused on the other. So if we can focus on others, then often what you find is even that discomfort we normally feel will dissipate. So we can use that to develop positive qualities for others. And on that point, there was a very nice little study they did to highlight this aversion I'd like to share. They did a study where they had a group of people and I think they applied some sort of heat pad to the leg. So it was quite painful. And they asked the people to keep telling them a level of pain. And they had a scale from 0 to 100. And at the same time, they had an intravenous drip into the person. And initially it was just saline solution going in. They didn't tell them what was sort of happening. So initially they had the heat pad on the leg, just saline solution. And they said, you know, what's your pain level? And the average was 66 out of 100. Then they started introducing painkiller without telling them. And they just kept saying pain level. Then, of course, because of that, it went down to 55 was the average. Then, nothing changed. They still had painkiller. Now they told them they were getting painkiller, and it went from 55 to 39. Then, they kept giving them painkiller, but now they said they're stopping the pain killing to expect pain. It went back to 64. 64. So we can see how much aversion magnifies suffering. So I thought that was a very nice study they did. Any questions about that? Otherwise, it's time for another short break. Okay, let's take another break. We'll come back at 5:15, and from 5:15 till 6, 45 minutes, we've got a meditation session, so we're going to break it into two again. And the topic for this meditation session is dealing with attachment. So that's what we're going to meditate on. 5:15, so I'll see you then.